The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz. Wow, another amazing book I had to read this last semester for my last semester in Spanish, and I'm so glad that we had to read this book because I learned so much. First of all, basically the premise of the book is telling the story of a young nerd who feels very ostracized and outcasted by society. He's Dominican by heredity, and he lives in New York for the most part. But it's basically set between New York and the Dominican Republic. And what's beautiful is it's set basically in the backdrop of Dominican history. So you learn so much from this book in just simply Dominican history alone and their dictatorship, El Trujillato, of Roberto Trujillo, the dictator who ruled, I want to say, in the late 50s, I'm pretty sure. And so it's basically the in-depth, personal, heart-wrenching story of this family, all these people who are, this Dominican family who's impacted by the dictatorship and its insane, violent killings that occurred. And what's so fascinating is such a serious and intense topic is covered beautifully, even though the tone of the novel, for the most part, the narrator is very much a humorous, informal, absolutely informal protagonist. So it's really great because you find out so much of this history, but it's there's so much humor. It's said in such a candid and direct, blunt way. And of course, we're analyzing this astrologically. So looking at Mr. Diaz's chart, first of all, the amazing dialogue. These characters are so rich. The narrator is so interesting because you don't necessarily like the narrator. He's kind of selfish, kind of an asshole. And what's interesting is even though the story is about Oscar Wilde, the ostracized, overweight, feels like he can't get any female attention and just very poor self-confidence. And yet he's a genius, and that's what you love about Oscar Wilde is. Telling of it's so interesting. The entire novel is a third party telling of Oscar's life, and it's by, I believe, Junior. Yeah, that's his name. And that's the protagonist you just very frustrated with sometimes, and it's kind of stupid, hostile, angry. But what's interesting too is you see his transformation at all, and you see his growth as a character in telling the story of Oscar and pretty much redeeming Oscar through this story. Their friendship is very special. Again, I don't want to go into it too much. I don't want to spoil anything. I want to focus on the astrological analysis. But it's really touching, Oscar's story. He's a genius of a kid, and I love the dialogue with him in it. And it's so, Juno has, I hope I'm saying his name right, has a moon in Gemini and Venus in Aquarius, so a wonderful eye for observation, and Mars is right on the cusp of Libra too, and there you go, Jupiter and Uranus and South Node are in Libra, so a wonderful eye for observation and understanding the differences between people, as well as the similarities, and the dialogue is so colorful, the characters are so very different, from very conservative characters to very liberal characters, and not just politically, just in their entire way of being, and he gets in their heads, he understands their emotions so eloquently, so deeply. And it's a joy really to read because there's just so many interesting and funny characters. Oscar is somebody that I would want to be friends with, and his dialogue especially is fantastic. I had to look up his words so many times. It's so funny, the dichotomy as well between Junior and Oscar, where Junior is much more street smart, even though he's an aspiring writer himself, and Oscar is seriously this genius who says words that are just flabbergasting. It's beautiful. So going back to the blunt, in-your-faceness, as per dialogue, that Juno has Mercury in Cap. I've always admired Mercury in Cap's ability to say things how they are, and just get to the point, and don't worry about being too formal. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. We all, listen to the same cuss and slang all the time. Okay, maybe not the exact same, but at the end of the day, we're all around cuss words. We're using slang and whatnot, or at the very least, we've heard slang. And I love how perfect example and just a gem from this book of beautiful in-your-face Mercury and Cap combined with intelligent, witty Moon in Gemini and Venus in Aquarius, is Robert Trujillo, aka known as Fuckface. So it's very beautiful to read such candid words in the book, and it's incredible too that such humor is employed and effective, considering the subject matter is such violence, and ultimately, I mean, it's in the title, the brief, wondrous life of Oscar Wilde. You know that Oscar is going to die, and it's set up during the entire novel, and the story is developed so well through the eyes and experiences of all these different characters of the family. And so there's also a big blunt factor of this dictatorship and the killings and the horrible atrocities that were committed. And the dictatorship is just one of many Latin American and South American dictatorships supported and created by the U.S. government in the past 50, 60 years. I believe every single country in South America and Latin America has had a dictatorship supported by and or put in power by, the case of Chile and Guatemala and several other places, by the American CIA. And of course the American people don't know about this. I myself was amazed by reading this book, because I've studied dictatorships, and especially in Latin America and South America, for a long time, and I had no idea about the Dominican Republic and its cruel atrocities that occurred in the late 40s, 50s, and whatnot. So reading this was a really great history lesson as well, and that's what I really enjoyed, was it paired the interesting dialogue, the modern day dialogue. I mean, we're talking about beautiful references to Lord of the Rings, to Star Wars, to, I believe Star Trek's in there. I mean, all of the nerd stuff is in there, and I love it. It's so interesting to have this dichotomy of rich, brutal, intense history telling, as well as, I mean, there's some scenes of violence in here that are very much going into detail, but at the end of the day, that happened, and it's very important to face those situations directly. And I'm so glad I read this book, because first, it was entertaining and amusing, but second, it was so rich with characters, so interested and intricate, and the storytelling and the different dialogues and perspectives and what people were thinking, and there's a lot of intrigue as well and all of that, considering the dictatorship and just a very fascist, fascist state, essentially. Dictatorship state is just horrible. And thirdly, yeah, I mean, I forgot what my first ones were, but basically I also really just love the history lessons. I really loved the in-depth understanding of Junot is born in Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic, and most of the novel takes place in Santo Domingo, as well as, I believe, the East Coast, New York, I'm not really sure, but somewhere on the East Coast. So let's see, oh yes, and the modern day references is so Venus and Aquarius. I loved that. I've never actually read a book, first of all, on the dictatorship, second of all, said so candidly and bluntly and beautifully, third of all, of such modern and in-tune references. I mean, to have Star Wars references and to have that's what I really enjoy too. There's so much thinking that goes on in the novel. It's almost like Junior, the narrator, was basically writing this, yes, to redeem Oscar, but even more so to understand and clear his own subconscious. And so there's so much thinking and so much philosophical thinking going on and reflecting, and you're present during all of it, before, during, and after Oscar's death, and how it impacts his family, how it impacts Junior, and all of the growth that occurs. And the final chapters especially are just so poignant in understanding human nature and regret, and the past and the present and the future, and maturity, growth. I mean, we grow along with these characters in short periods of time, and also long periods of time. In fact, most of them long periods of time. We see the characters, in some cases, some centuries, some decades earlier, 30, 40 years, and we see them then grown up with kids of their own and whatnot, and it's fascinating to be with these characters that are so interesting, so funny, so pained. They've all been through so much pain because of this dictatorship, and just the violence and the killings. that to see this family go forward, even through the death of, well, hell, even through any death, is a really moving experience. It's a brilliant account, truly, of human beings, let alone an entire culture and you know, the dictatorship they suffered. So I really recommend it. It really is incredible. It gets deep. It gets light. It's such a multifaceted work, and of course, Moon and Gemini. It's expertly told by an expert storyteller. There's just so much diversity in it. In fact, I want to say there's three main parts. There's at least three main parts of different perspectives, and getting in the heads of these characters and understanding these little mini stories, these little vignettes that paint a larger story of what happens with this family during this time, and because of the roots of the dictatorship. So, for all those reasons, you should definitely check this book out. It's incredible, and you learn so much, you feel so much, and yeah, it's definitely worth it. You learn a lot more than is even apparent. Very, very moving prose.